Please click the subscribe button and the notification icon. It will help us a lot. Hi, this is Rodrigo from the Creative Hostler Show, and today we have an amazing guest here. Her name is Arryn Troche, and she is a 3D character animator who is actually focusing a lot on becoming an action animator, doing fights, studying the body dynamics, and I think that this is a very important topic because so far we have been interviewing a lot of animators who do projects that are, let's say, a little bit more into the calm range of animations, and we haven't gone at all into all these interviews into fight animations, into creating the choreographies, how to make a fight look natural, and these are very, very hard type of animations to do. Arryn has a lot of experience working on that, and even though she's still a student at the Savannah College of Art, I think, and Design, she has worked on a lot of animations as a lead animator, and also has worked doing character design for 3D games. So I think she has a way more experience than the average student who hasn't gotten to work into a lot of projects. And we're going to experience here, like, we're going to try to explore what it takes to do action animation, and as well kind of the benefits of going into college. This is a type of interviews that we haven't done in quite a while, or of interviewing the students, but I think it is important to try to keep this ongoing. So without any further ado, welcome, Arryn.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So just to get started, can you tell us a little bit more about your history? Why did you decide to go into art? Pretty much what got you started as an action animator?
I figured out that I wanted to go into art pretty late in the game. I come from a family of doctors and a lot of people with military history, so it was not really on the table for art to be a career. And then I was on a school trip over spring break, and we got stuck on a bus for 2 hours doing absolutely nothing, and I just kind of was drawing. We had an art class that we had to take that was mandatory, and I just kind of was drawing, and I realized I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do at the time. And while I was kind of in that uncertainty, I came across a piece of animation that I really connected with, and I just got the feeling that of like, I want to do this. I don't know what this is, but I want to do this, and kind of having the realization that all of those TV shows and all of those movies that came out, that people were behind those. I wanted to take part in that. So I kind of ran full steam ahead, having no art experience, into trying to get as much art experience as I could before going to college.
Nice. Just as a tiny doubt, this animation that you watch doesn't happen to be Ruby, or
Yeah,
was it something else?
no, it was Ruby. It was the Red trailer. I had a friend who had been quoting the show a lot and talking about it constantly, and I didn't really know what it was. I wasn't super familiar with Monty Ohm or with Rooster Teeth. And one day I was kind of like, you know what, I'm having a crap day. I have nothing else to do. And I just watched it, and I think just the first moments of it and seeing how the movements were, it was like when you're watching someone do like when you're tilting control when you're playing like a racing game, as if you make it turn. Like, I wasn't there holding a scythe, but I felt like my body was like, do the thing, do it, even though I wasn't there. And I was like, I want to make someone have this feeling. I want to get that kind of joy from it.
Yeah, definitely. When I first found about Monty, I think this is, again, the first realization that I had that action animation was a thing, and it was with his project, The Fantasy. And
Yep.
I was blown away by that. And back then, like, doing 3D animation took like a very specialized computer, still does. But we are talking back, I think, in 2008. So just the fact that that one person did all that, it blew my mind. It blew my mind a lot.
Yeah.
And back then I had a job. I think my first job in let's say actually production, and we were at a TV advertisement kind of things, and that's where I got along with my partner in business, but we had a lot of animators over there, and I saw the work that it took. I actually had to put together the computers because I was an IT specialist. So I knew the kind of power that it took. There were times that, and we are talking about TV ads that just last 30 seconds and things like that. And back in 2008, there were times where we had to put like together 5 computers, put it in a network, so they could all render just one animation of 30 seconds, and it took like 2 days. And then I saw this guy doing everything on his own, and was like, wow.
Yeah. I love how the one thing that stayed consistent through 3D animation the entire time is just how much you have to get together to actually render out a project. Like, despite the fact that computers are getting better and better, the render time seems to stay exactly the same.
Yeah, it's still the friend that did 3D animation back then. We are still good friends, and eventually he put his own studio as well, and he ended up like building a mini render farm that put all the computers in his closet, and it was chaotic. But yeah, as you say, like even though computers have advanced a lot, like we're still having these problems. Like, okay, this is a 15-second animation. We're going to put 6 computers rendering, and this is going to take 1 week.
I actually have a shot rendering right now, and it's been rendering for the past 3 days.
Yeah, this is something good. And back then in the job, like we used every time that somebody enter the animation room, and they will find us sometime kind of sleeping behind the desk, and they will ask like, what are you doing? Like, rendering.
Yeah, it's like, what else are you supposed to do? You can't make the computer go faster. It's like, you may as well just sleep while you can.
Yeah, and it takes all the computer resources. Like, you cannot do anything else. You cannot watch internet. You cannot do Messenger. Back then, Messenger was still a thing, but you couldn't do anything else. Like, once the computer started rendering, like, we cannot do anything. Let's go and do something else. And what did you decide, like, not sure when did you enter college, but I think that we have been in a point for the last 5 years where I think we can kind of learn this thing on our own, or get resources that teach us to do animations very cheaply and still very efficient. So what made you wanted to go to college, and what made you take the decision?
College was not really I never really had an option whether to do college or not. It was just kind of a thing that in my family, you go to college. That is what you do, which I was fine with. I'm definitely someone who likes to learn and does better in a environment where I'm kind of being guided to learn something. But I did look at other outside stuff. There wasn't a super large amount of 3D animation stuff out at the time, and I don't think it would have helped me because I had such a bare bones understanding of what it was. Like, I knew what good animation was. I knew what it looked like. I understood like the basics of it, but I wasn't sure how to go from comprehending it to actually creating it. If someone sat me down in front of Maya and gave me all the tools, I wouldn't have been able to make anything good. I needed that like little bit of instruction, but I know that definitely now things are a lot better, because even with being in college, I maxed out the 3D character program. They don't have any more 3D character animation classes for me to take, so I'm actually taking classes outside of my college to try to learn in my free time.
Nice. That is a good thing. Just a doubt here. Did you have to go into creating like a monster computer for yourself, or does the college actually provide to you computers that are good enough to kind of do the work?
A little bit of both. The school has a giant computer lab called Montgomery Hall, which we all call Monty, which really, really I found kind of ironic, where I spent most of my time, because they were high quality computers. Some of them were a little bit on the older side, but they were always the top software. They couldn't quite run Maya like butter, but they could run it better than anything I had. But with everything going on, and then last quarter, I needed to do some stuff on my own. I wanted to pursue my own work. I started building a computer of my own. So I have a bare bones monster computer where I think we managed to scrounge together some parts from the internet based on some recommendations, where it basically runs exclusively Maya, and that's it. There's no Office programs on it. It's just Maya and the Adobe suite. It
Yeah,
didn't even have an internet connection.
yeah, I remember this guy that I was telling you about that does 3D animation has his own render farm. Back when we were in college, first year he did the first semester and pretty much failed almost all all signatures except like one. But what I like about him is that in the second semester, since he failed pretty much all signatures and he could only take like 2 classes that were really, really simple, what he did was he started like putting together his own computer from many pieces that weren't being used from family members, things like that. And he started to learn 3D. And the good thing, something that I admire about him is that I know a lot of people who kind of fail at college and they have a lot of free time later on, but they don't do anything productive with that. He went the other way around. Like he went full on learn. He uses 3D Max Studio, but he got like books. Back then the internet wasn't that great still. Like YouTube even didn't even exist. That we're talking about 2003. So yes, yeah, it was 2003. So he learned to do the animations and to do the stuff like from books. So that was a little bit more impressive for me. And he went all in, like pretty much all day learning about that. And when he came back in the next year to try to do the same signatures that he had failed, now he was like kind of passing by because he had become a really good animator, and he had a lot of understanding that a lot of us didn't because we were like busy doing homework. But on that topic, again, I have been a little bit disconnected from 3D animation, but how hard it is to learn 3D animation right now?
There's a lot of resources out there, so I think the hardest part is figuring out what you want to listen to. Like you can search up any small problem with an animation or any question with an animation and have like 300 videos pop up, but not all of them are going to be helpful or are going to be what's quote the right way to go about doing something. Like I think the materials are out there, but just kind of just like how it was back then, you have to be willing to really throw yourself into it. Like, especially if you're doing it on your own, it's like you need to be able to give your entire self to it because you're creating life with something. You need to be able to put your life into it. And that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I learned from my partner because we focus mostly on 2D animation, but he kind of learned as well on his own doing a lot of experiments. Back then we have this kind of pirate game called Mugen that where it is a fighting game, and the cool thing about it is that you can download characters and upload them there, so you can have fights like Goku versus Kenshin from Rurouni Kenshin, or let's say Ruby versus Saitama from One Punch Man, or Jigglypuff even, like, and you have all these characters there. And something that he did back then was, out of curiosity, started like analyzing the sprites from these video game characters, and he started noticing, like, for example, when somebody was going to give a punch, they didn't just throw the punch, but they actually went like a frame back to kind of give impulse, and then to gain momentum, and then throw the punch. And he started to see all these tiny little things. So you have studied a lot of body dynamics. So let's enter right now into the territory of how do you produce an action animation? How do you go into like use really complex choreographies and the whole creative process?
Reference. It's a lot of reference. A lot of the things that I animate people fighting and a lot of other fight animators will do is like the things you're going to have them doing aren't necessarily physically possible, which is part of what makes them so much fun. But you do need to find a way to make something that is impossible look realistic. So you have to find the people out there who can get as close to it as possible and then add that little push to it. I think my YouTube likes are just parkour videos and just people pretending to punch each other and just looking at how certain things move and figuring out, okay, so when you throw a punch, you always have to like pull back this way and usually your stance is like this. But if you punch a different way, it changes it in this matter. So if you were to take this aspect of it and apply it to, I don't know, being in midair, how would that affect it? And a lot of trial and error and a lot of standing up at your desk and pretending that you know what you're doing. The amount of times that I would just be sitting at my computer and like animating something and be like, I don't know how this works. I can't do a standing backflip off of like a crate, but I can pretend to like throw my torso back. Like, what does that feel like? Because ultimately you're trying to get the feeling, but I definitely go about my animations differently than I think a lot of people do and different than a lot of kind of environments will do is I don't necessarily start out with a storyboard. I will sometimes have like rough ideas of like, oh, I want this pose, and I'll definitely try to keep those in. But for the most part, I go straight ahead with all of my animation, and which is basically, it's just stream of consciousness. It's like, okay, I want them to do this, but if they're in this pose, what's the most realistic way for them to go on to this next idea? It's like, if they're like this, and their person they're attacking is over on their left, would they turn so that they can go back with their dominant hand, or would they just go with their non-dominant hand? Like, what's the way to go about this? And a lot of the times it leads to scrapping a lot of animation and it doesn't always pan out, but when it does pan out, you kind of get this nice flow of it feels like it is happening in the moment. But there are times when you do want to plan it out, especially if you're working with someone else. I'm working with a friend on doing a shot of the Lincoln Zelda rigs that are out, fighting against another video game rig, and having to fully plan out that fight in the environment so that we can each tackle parts of it is really tricky because it's like, okay, if I'm trying to get this idea out, how do I do this without basically starting the process of animating just to throw it away and save time? So it depends on if you're doing it by yourself or if you're trying to do it with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also, how do you add, let's say, the element of fantasy? Because let's be honest, when we go into see fights, even in just live movies of actors doing choreography, there is a lot of movements that, let's say, they are not realistic. That if you try to do them online, you will get punched really easy. So one of the examples that I can put is that if this is, there are guys who actually do this right now. Like they go and put helmets and swords and shields and they fight like Vikings, and it is a sport. And I have even found a couple of analysis on that. So let's see, we see in an action movie like people doing like a complete 360 degrees swing to try to give like a huge hit or something like that. But realistically, if you do that, like the moment you give your back, the other guy just go, stop,
yeah,
you're dead. And the same with punches. Like if you go, I did boxing for a while, and it was like very straightforward. Like you keep your punches here, and you go like a straight line. But if you go to try to do some flip or something like that, the other guy just punch you in the neck really easily, and you're done. So but again, like this kind of extra movements is what it gives the fight animations and the fight choreographies like a little bit of extra flavor. Let's say, like it makes them seem nicer.
Yeah.
So how do you go about finding out the balance of adding, let's say, the fantasy mixed with the reality? So as you say, like it looks realistic even though it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of, it's referred to as the rule of cool, is figuring out like for the most part, it's good to start in what's realistic, even if you're going for something that's super over the top and super cartoony, is like trying to start in reality and then figuring out how exactly you can kind of bend that to your will. And it's like, well, what would be cool here? How would this be cool? It's like if you want to have them jump extra high up and do like a really dramatic kick, naturally they would fall harder. There would be more of an impact there. So it's just it's really just disobeying the laws of physics and then having to experience the repercussions later, but to a smaller degree. It's just playing God.
Yeah, I've seen some people call it like anime physics when
Oh
when
yeah,
things that you know
100%.
you know that it is impossible that happens in real life, but it kind of makes sense in
And part
animation.
yeah. And part of it is because the nature of animation, unless it's hyper realistic, is you know it's animation. Even if you're super involved in it, your brain is aware that it's like, oh, I'm not looking at a real person. So you can naturally kind of get away with some more stuff. And another thing that you want to keep in mind is exactly like the poses that they're in, because having it be very clear and readable is super important and to connect into the character and what it even looks like. So if you were kind of closed up and guarded like you would be for boxing, you're not getting a good silhouette. If you were just to make it a plain silhouette, it's really contained and it's stagnant, which while is practical, doesn't look super cool if you take away all the inside part. So it's just a matter of what can I stick out to make this look interesting and still have it read and add some character to it as well.
Nice. And have you seen like any differences when it comes to doing action animation, let's say for animation or plus doing it for video games?
For video games, I personally find it a little harder because you have to ultimately go back to the same pose. For video games, since it all has to stem off of the idle animation, they have to start and they have to end in the same pose. And just with the way that I animate, kind of charging ahead into something, I always think of something more as a scene than as an action. So when trying to animate a combo attack, I had my character like running forward and doing this cool move, and then I was like, wait a second, they have to ultimately get back to where they were on that square. This can't actually work. It has to be over the top and dramatic, but you ultimately have to get back to the same starting point. So it's a different kind of puzzle of you have the beginning and you have the end. It's just a matter of how do I do the middle and then get to and from it. I feel like it's a little bit more constrained.
And when it comes to the choreographies of the fight, like it is actually the job of the animator, or do you have somebody else helping you? Like, okay, the fight is going to start here, then it's going to move here, then they are going to try to do this, something like that. Like, how does the logistics look on that?
It depends on the production. I know that some places the storyboard artists will do like rough ideas of like what are supposed to happen. Like there's going to be a punch here, there's a kick here, this happens here, and you have to basically take those moments and fill in the blanks and then just make them extra cool. And then other places are just kind of like, there's a fight here. Do what you will, end in this pose. And then budget is also another huge part of it. Because it's like, oh yeah, I want to have this like cool fight with 6 guys. And it's like, we have the money for 2 guys. Redo it for however you can do that. It's a lot of, it really depends on what the circumstances are, because it's never the same case twice.
Yeah, and I think that is really true, because even if you have the right team, I guess, like even if you don't have the budget, but if the people are passionate, they are willing to do extra work just because they want to. One of the teams, and we interviewed these guys a couple of years ago, that I have like mad respect for them is Team Cherry in Australia. They created this game called Hollow Knight. And
Yeah.
so pretty much this team is just 4 people, like 1 animator, 1 developer, 1 sound designer, and the marketer. And they got the money that was, if I remember correctly, like $36,000. It was a little bit more in Australian dollars, but it was really that. And they told me that they actually got into a basement to save money, and they just started working non-stop, and they didn't leave that basement. So quarantine times.
Oh yeah.
And what even surprised me was that this guy was trying to save so much money that in order to not pay an extra license, he did all the art and all the animations in Photoshop. And I was like, wow. Wow.
I
So,
mean,
so if you have that kind of people, like budget can kind of stretch quite a
yeah.
bit.
I mean, costs add up really quickly. And that's one thing that I think they definitely tried to teach us at school, was that every time you want to bring on another person to help you out, that's another cost that you'd have to account for. And I know people who have graduated, and every time that they have like a contract job end, they just move back in with their parents until they find a new one, because that way they can save as much money as possible. And it's like, okay, how can I repurpose? It's really just a matter of how much money can I save until I can get my next paycheck.
Yeah, and well, one of the great examples of this, I think, as well, is it will be the series Ruby. Like, if you see Volume 1,
Yeah.
you can see they did way more than the budget allowed, but they did it out of passion. And even though there was a lot of glitches and the shadow people and things like that, like
Yeah.
they still were able to create something that was good enough to get people interested in the series. And there is a book called the Lena Startup, and this is more jargon of the technical startup kind of thing, but they have this concept of the minimum viable product. So they just put something that kind of works, and that's what they launched, but they try to maximize the effort based on very limited budget. So I think that is when it comes to applying that kind of principle into animation, the Volume 1 from this series was a great example, and the game Hollow Knight again is another great example of that.
I think especially with Ruby, just because of how the volumes have kind of progressed over time, is what with Volume 1, it's like, yeah, there's some animations in there that aren't super great and don't like hold up super well over time, but people are really drawn to heart and to the potential that something has. So even though it wasn't like this fully fleshed out, like fully gorgeous universe, like it didn't look like a Pixar movie, people were like, there's something good here. You can tell people are putting everything into it. And whenever you see someone who's really giving their all for something that they care about, it just inherently instills you with this feeling of, this has got to be something special. Because if this many, like if someone's willing to give that much of themselves to create something, that something is going to be special from that alone.
Yeah, and I think that moment hit to me in that series when, well, the series starts, you see kind of the animation being kind of choppy and weird and kind of an animatronic. And then we got the first serious fight with like a huge scorpion and a huge bird. And the animation changes completely. Like you see the spike in quality and they put all their effort probably into that, and it shows. And I think that's the moment that everybody was like, okay, I'm into this. And
like that fight especially, I saw it when they were airing all the volumes in theaters. I got lucky enough to see Volume 1 play in theaters, and when that episode came out, I think that's one of the moments where I realized how interesting fight animation could be, because it's not just like punching someone. It can be, but I think seeing how all these different characters fought differently, how they all handled different situations differently, and it was completely without dialogue. It was almost completely without them like talking to each other or interacting. They all moved so differently from one another. Like even with how they're all falling in rubble, they all get back up to the same space in a completely different way. And it tells you everything you need to know about them without a single word. And I think that moment where it's like you can tell stories while beating the crap out of a giant monster was like, okay, so this is the best of both worlds. All right.
Yeah, I think that is one of the cool things about animation, is that when you do it right, it can communicate a lot without even saying much. And well, one of the examples of this, I think, will be The Lion King, and I think they did a lot of work, and massive respect to the animators who did that into the expressions. So when Nala, for example, finds Simba and he finds him like being irresponsible, and he had like if you start analyzing the expression Simba has, like it kind of wants. It gives you the feeling that you want to slap him, like, wake up, like you're not supposed to be this kind of idiotic guy, like you should be more.
Yeah, it's like, get it together.
Yeah, right. So and again, like even when, well, all the other fights that stick with me will be like Mob Psycho 100 or One Punch Man.
Yeah.
those guys definitely push like the technique and did something that, even though I think we can find examples of that in other series, it really felt unique to
Mhm.
to to the way and how they did it. And again, like as you say, you can see, like for example, the first serious fight that Mob enters in Mob Psycho. Uh, you have this shy guy, but then this monster kind of awakens, and you can see, okay, this guy is like repressing a lot of feelings.
It's like, can someone get this boy a therapist, please?
Yeah, and it's a very short animation, but you can read a lot into it, and
Mhm.
again, without a word or anything coming from the character. So I think that is something really hard to achieve.
Yeah. I think it's definitely something that like you see more in anime as well, because there tends to be more fighting in anime than the animation that is in the US, because the animation that is in kind of the more Western world is definitely aimed more towards kids for the most part, or it's kind of like a crude sexual humor. You don't really get that middle range of, hey, this is animation. If I want, I can have a guy fly around and punch like an alien into space. Huh. So just because there's more of it, you can see like these whole different takes on it. And I I've seen so many fights in it. Like I almost exclusively watch anime with fights just because I love to watch them. And like I think Soul Eater especially was one of the first ones I really started watching. And to this day it's one of my favorites because they have all these different weapons and all the characters move differently and there's all these different camera moves and it's like watching it is just like the amount of planning that went into this, like the amount of effort and little cheats that they did here and there to get the feelings right. The feelings different for every single character is just mind blowing.
And some now that you have touched this topic, I wanted to ask you this because this is, you probably are more connected to the cultural aspect of this in this way, but you just mentioned that there is no middle ground in the United States. Like it is either for kids or it is for adults, but there is no middle ground.
Yeah.
And culturally speaking, I see like a lot of people thinking that, yeah, that there is no market, that this is not going to be a hit, that why try to do something like that. And I see this lacking in series like this being produced in the US or Canada or whatever. But the market is there. Like
Mm-hmm.
the market is definitely there. Like if you go to San Diego Comic Con, you know, or any event,
Oh
any
yeah.
exposition, like you see, like why is this not happening yet? Like again, like the market is here, all the signs are around it. So why is this belief that this is not something that is going to work being perpetrated in the industry? Uh, why don't we see more going into creating series like that in the US?
um we actually covered this in my history of animation class. um It honestly kind of ties back to the earlier days of TV when people started having more and more TVs in their house, is that they wanted the means to produce something cheaply and quickly. And animation is not particularly fast or cheap. So whenever they had something that worked, there was very much the idea of kids are stupid. Whatever we create doesn't have to be good. They'll watch it anyway. And it was like, oh yeah, well, save like the high quality stuff for the adults at night. And they would just have like animated stuff on. And that was kind of the beginning of this idea that animation, while being more expensive, was something narratively lacking that could entertain children. And that kind of continued to be an idea. And that did shift a little bit with Disney, but Disney stuff was still kind of more oriented towards children. And part of that was just because when he first started out doing animation, the only properties that were kind of free licensed were these sort of fairy tales and storybooks that would inherently appeal to children. But it was just because those were the first things that really saw success that was viewed as, oh, it can really only be for children. Whereas that wasn't something that was as big of an issue in other countries. Like when they first imported Astro Boy from Japan to the US, they actually changed the storyline to make it more kid-friendly. Because in Japan, it was initially that he had caused a car accident because of his recklessness that caused him to become Astro Boy. Whereas in the US, they were like, all of the cars are self-driving and magical or scientific, and it was a freak accident that caused it. They made it less kind of complex and just kind of kept pushing that. And I think there is a reluctance to get away from this ideal that's been held for so long, because most animated features are still aimed at kids because they're bright and they're colorful. And just kind of as a society, we have this weird focus on, for something to be for adults and for something to be mature, it has to be dark and gritty and edgy and depressing. And animation's not usually seen in that light. So it's just kind of this never-ending loop. But it is something that is changing, thankfully, but it's taking a while.
Yeah, it's taking definitely it's taking quite a long time, and I'm still surprised that like high executives haven't realized like, okay, yeah, this is a big market and it's present and there is a lot of money here. Like we should do that. and
a lot of people don't want to take the risk.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like, because any animation project is a huge risk and it's a huge investment. And anytime someone kind of goes out on a limb, it makes them really nervous, which is why even when there's kind of spin-offs of things, it's always like a TV show based on a successful movie. It's very kind of risky to do something that's new and unheard of. But when that was done, some of the best TV shows that were kind of in this middle ground were created. Like that's how Avatar: The Last Airbender came out. That's how all these shows from like the early 2000s and 90s came out, was everyone was like, hey, you know what? Let's just give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. What can happen? And we had all these amazing shows, and then it was just kind of boiled down versions of that, trying to market more towards one specific audience, because no one's really sure how to market towards just like between the ages of 12 and like 25. No one knows how to market to that group. They're just like, TikTok, is that it?
Yeah, I think that there is a huge disconnect. There is a guy that I followed, Tom Bilyeu, and he's trying to build the next Disney. And to do that, he has been traveling a lot to Japan, and he's kind of covering the kind of his journey into learning all these things about animation. And what he found is that Japan has like all these segments, and they target specifically to them. So, for example, they have segments for girls or for boys. They like even a specific range of ages. Like they have it. They have a lot of, let's say, markets that they have tested a lot, and they go directly into that. And he's been trying to analyze that and realizing that this is something that is missing in the US, like as you mentioned, the knowledge on how to market each range, let's say, of each interest. And something that happened here, because, well, Latin Americans, we all come from a lot of wars and dictatorships, and who were like kind of really brutal. And so when anime came here, like, compared to what we have seen as kids in real life, like it didn't look like a big deal. So we have zero censorship. And recently I realized that there was this series called Saint Seiya that went into the US and was a complete flop. And the reason why it was a complete flop was because it was so highly censored that they reduced a series that was like 100 episodes into 26. But that series was like brutally violent for those times, and we were able to see like no censorship at all. Like, and if you go to Latin American people and you ask them about Sensei of Los Caballeros del Zodiaco, they will go crazy about it. We all loved it back then, but if you go to people in the US and ask them, like, no, that series sucks, and it's because they censor so much. So
there's always a lot of censoring. Like I remember hearing stories about, I didn't watch Dragon Ball growing up, but I remember people would say that sometimes fights would just spontaneously break out because they would censor out whatever caused it because it was viewed as inappropriate. And there was huge issues with censorship documents for forever. And also the whole issue with marketing specifically is that there was a time period where I think we realized that you can make a profit off of marketing to a very small specific group. And that moment was just Star Trek. And then that happened. And then it's like they collectively chose to ignore it and are just trying to go for the masses instead.
Yeah, that is quite bad, because I think that this kind of rigid thinking is what, well, if you see kind of the business side of the animation industry and animation companies, they have been failing for quite some time. And it's because they have been trying to target to the masses, that they have created like these algorithms to make a movie or to make an history, and that people see over and over again. And people are way smarter, I think, that what executives give them credit to. They can pinpoint really, really fast, like the tropes or the algorithm, or how the story is going to go if they've seen it a couple of times. And when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, like you kind of lose the interest of people really, really fast. And yeah, and now that we have this whole situation with the lockdowns in every country and all that, like I think the entertainment industry is going to look very, very different after we come out of all of this mess.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that I've seen like two takes about the entertainment industry. I'm seeing a lot of people being like, oh, we don't appreciate them enough. And then I've also seen a lot of people who are just like, why are entertainment workers like complaining about not getting compensation? I'm just like, if you're watching Netflix 18 hours a day, who do you think made that? Like,
yeah.
Like, oh, you're reading a comic book, I see. Do you know someone drew that? Wow. Amazing. There's just kind of this disconnect between it, because you just have like the big mental image of this, it's just like a concept, or it's just the whole idea of the company of Disney, and not the idea of, all right, there's people who work in like divisions who work at that company.
Yeah, definitely. But like, even in these companies, there are, like, again, these rules, because they are trying to target to masses. And where it hit me really hard, and I asked a couple of people about this, was with the movie Frozen, because I was able to see some of the concept art from this movie. And I thought, like, wow, this art is amazing.
Yep.
Why the hell? Why isn't this art like this in the movie? Like, why are we having this generic kind of drawings or models? Like, this is so much better. Artistically speaking, visually speaking, this is so much better than what we're watching in the movie.
Because
why
they're more easily made into dolls if they look like that.
Yeah, and that was the answer. Also, again, coming back to the, but doing this kind of detail takes a lot of work as well, so more money, more budget. So they are trying, and they explain me that the executives, let's say the producers, have gained so much power that they can take over creative freedom sometimes. So even if you have like this huge company where it is kind of the mecca of all the artists who will be willing to do the work just to do something amazing, you have the marketing people coming to them, and it's like, no, you're not going to do that because it goes out of this algorithm that we have for marketing. It's like,
well, that's literally what happened with the Sonic movie. It was not the art team who did the first design, and then they got the backlash, and they were like, maybe we should have listened to the art team about this. And it happens constantly. The same sort of thing happened with Kung Fu Panda. The reason that movie was so good was because they made sure the director had as little of a hand in it as possible. Every time he had to go to a meeting, someone would be like, oh, something's happening, and like would draw him away. So they were able to make this movie that they were all passionate about and put all their creative energy into it without someone being like, one of the higher ups being like, I don't know if this will sell well.
Yeah, and one of the things that made Pixar great was that kind of process, that they even, there is even documentation that says that they take all the creative people, they put them in the cabin in the middle of the woods, and for example, they will just go into the history, and even if they have like a finished history, there will be a moment where, no, this is not working, this is not that good, and they will throw everything away. So for every movie in Pixar, they throw away the history like 5 times each. and but again, it's just the creative team, and something that Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull did when they sold themselves to Pixar was to put in the deal that Disney had no right to order anything from Pixar. Like they wouldn't be even to use the animation team from Pixar only for as teachers. Like someone from Pixar can go as teacher to kind of give capacitations to the Disney people because they were failing at the time. But that was it. And Disney had zero power over Pixar, even though they have bought it. But that's what made Pixar great, I think, that the artistic people were in control of the histories.
Yeah.
And going a little bit more into the professional area, I see that you have like, even though you are a student, you have a lot of experience. You have been working in a lot of animations. I think that this is great because most people become a student. They go out as being a student, and they don't have any real practice. They don't have any real experience, and that's when they have trouble finding another job. I think that what you're doing is great because you're actually working on both, like getting the real experience and learning as well. So how did you go about that? And I'm guessing as well that many people who are studying, because this career is not easy, are going to ask, like, where does she get the time?
I don't have the time. I don't sleep, which is not a good thing. I mean, most of the projects that I do, I found out about through my school, or they started there. One of my friends works as a rigger, and she had rigged on a game, and they were looking for animators. So she was like, hey, I know you know how to animate. I know these people are cool. Why don't you go help them out? So I helped them out, and that's how I ended up on that game. And for the films, people just needed animators. They just didn't have enough for their crew. They only had like 10-person crews. They needed animators. And my school only had, I think, a handful of us who were really focusing in 3D character. And as a result, we were in high demand. People were just like, we don't have anyone who specialized in this. We need someone who has specialized in this. And it was basically however much I could help out with without dying was what I tried to do. I'm someone who likes to throw my entire self into things. And I think especially with the school that I go to, you get out of it what you put into it. And considering how much money I have to pay to go there, I'm putting my entire life in it. Like I would stay in the building. Like it would only open up as an open lab after classes at like 7:30 or 10:30 at night. So I would be there at 7:15 to make sure I got a good computer. And I would stay there until like 5 or 6 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, go to class, and repeat. Which is not a good thing to do.
Well,
not a good thing to do.
So this is something that I tell people when we give speeches into because sometimes they call us to give speeches into universities here, and I think, culturally speaking, in the whole world, we have gotten to the point where we're kind of telling the students, like, okay, you're young, like, enjoy your life, enjoy, have parties, just do what you want, because you're not going to be able to do it throughout your life, so try to enjoy it. And it's kind of true, but there is something that nobody, I think, is talking about, which is that this kind of energy that you have to be able to do this kind of work that you're talking about is not forever. Like once you get to 25, you will start feeling the decline. And
21 and I feel it.
and when you're like, when I was about 22, I could go a week without a sleep, and of course I will be completely messed for a couple of days, but then I will be energized again, and I will be able to throw myself into it. Now if I don't sleep for one night, like the next day I'm completely destroyed, like I'm completely zombified. I cannot think clearly. And so that is something that I tell young students, like, yeah, it's true, there is a lot of things that you will only be able to enjoy in this age, because even just because you just grew up, there are things that you enjoy right now that later on, like you're going to be doing it. It's like, I don't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you are never going to have again this kind of energy to work this hard. And if
Mm-hmm.
you use it like the way you are using it right now, once you go out, like you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. When it comes to experience, you will be able to stand out of the rest of the people
Mm.
asking for jobs. And it's like, what are you doing? Well, I have done all this and I have all this experience. And that's what gets you hired at the end.
Yeah. And like it is important to learn to try to find that balance. And that's something that I'm really struggling with now, is that since I now have my computer and I'm not bound to the fact that I can only use the computer lab after 7:30 at night, it's like I could potentially be working all day, but I'm trying to find a way to sleep and drink water and take care of myself and not run myself into the ground. And having been running like full speed ahead for so long, learning to like only do that within a limited period of time and still be able to go out and spend time with people and not die is definitely very hard. And that was something I started feeling last quarter before this all happened as well. Is like my friends would be like, oh yeah, we watched this movie. Like, we're going to watch this. Do you want to go see it? And it's like, I can't. I signed myself up for all this work. And as a result, I missed out on spending a lot of time with people who I was close with because I was both going full steam ahead and like living like this way because I won't be able to later, and at the same time not doing that. So it's definitely finding a weird balance between it is really important, because like while your work is important, so is being a human being and learning social skills.
Yeah, definitely. That this you just mentioned something really important, which is like learning social skills, and and I mentioned that because in this industry, in this area of art, I know not too many, but enough people who have this thinking of, well, if I'm just good enough artist, then everything is good. But they forget that companies, like everything, is made out of people. Like any organization is made out of people, and you have to know how to deal with people. And especially in animation, where you work with a team, you have to be able uh, to get along with them and pretty much make them friends. And one of the stories that we got from one of the interviews with Nathan Fox was that he was in this job. There was this project that was funded, and everybody was working, and there was one guy who was really, really good artist, but never got along with anybody. And he will just go inside the office, put his headphones on, do the work, get out, never socialize with anybody. And then a problem happened, and the funding got cut, and they had to fire people. And even though he was like one of the best artists that they had in the team, like they chose to fire him because he didn't get along with anybody. So if the decision, the kind of the mental decision process was like, well, if you fire somebody who is getting along with everybody, like the morale of the team is going to go down. Like people are going to feel bad about this decision. But this guy doesn't get along with anybody. Nobody's going to miss him. Like he's really good artist,
Yeah.
but nobody's going to miss him. So the morale, if we drop the morale, then the quality overall is going to drop a little bit. We just lay this guy out. But as long as we have good enough work, we're good. And that's it. Like they let him out. Oh, he didn't do anything bad. He probably wasn't a bad person, but because he didn't socialize, he was let go. So
Yeah.
socializing, very important.
The whole mentality that like you don't have to be a nice person, you just have to be good, only really applies if you're like Da Vinci or Michelangelo. You have to be ridiculously good. And even then, they're only going to work with you for as long as they have to. Like as soon as you're no longer needed, they're going to be rid of you. Like I've been told by like several hires that they will take someone who is good and friendly over someone who is great and stuck up.
Yeah, and this is a lesson that comes up in these interviews a lot. Like we have interviewed the founder of Cartoon Saloon, the founder of Predator, a lot of people who have started studios. They all say the same thing. Like, one, they will take before hiring somebody, they will take a long time analyzing them. Like they are going to put a lot of attention into you to see, and the question that they are trying to answer is like, one, can I work with this person for 5 years? Two, like, is this person going to come up with good ideas, like over and over and over? Like, is this person going to give me like 100 good ideas? But they all tell me that they all have said, and it is all in these videos, that if they have to choose between a really amazing artist that really doesn't get well with the team, and this guy who is like really integrated, but he's not kind of there yet with the quality of art, they would rather spend 5 years trying to polish this person into making him a good artist or making her a good artist than dealing with a guy who is not going to be getting along with anybody. And that is,
it's easier to train a skill. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. It's easier to train a skill than it is to break down an ego.
Yeah, that is true. That is definitely true. And in terms of learning, how do you go about learning? Like, first of all, well, let's say if we put it into percentages, what kind of percentages are you learning come from the university, from the college, or in what percentage is it coming from your own, and what platforms or what resources are you using to learn? Are you using books? Are you using courses, YouTube videos? How do you go about kind of getting all these skills?
It's hard to put in a percentage because some of it's kind of muddled, because like we would only go over certain things in my classes, and it was kind of up to me to explore them further. So I think it was probably like 60 or 70% just learning on my own, but it was that I was given like these clear goalposts and places, like certain levels to meet. Like it was like, okay, we're going to be learning FK, IK switching. Here's the very basics of how to do it. Figure it out. Just go off, run with it, fail until you figure it out. And so in that respect, they weren't giving me a lot, but it was giving me enough that I could take the idea and run with it, from doing my own research and watching different animations. Like the amount of times that I've framed through movies is probably kind of concerning. I didn't realize how much I remembered a movie that almost no one remembers until I rewatched it the other day. And I was like, why can I still quote lines from this? And it's like, oh, it's because to analyze facial acting, I looked at this one scene probably about 15 times, like just going frame by frame by frame.
Nice.
So it's definitely like, I think it's probably like 70-30 of me pursuing ideas independently, and that 30% of just being given the ideas in the first place.
Nice. Something that I want to go on, touch a little bit as well, is that even though you have been like really, really busy, learning a lot, working in a lot of projects, like doing your own thing, you also kind of started like a YouTube channel that has grown a lot, and doing reactions and things like that. So I'm guessing that's more on the line of a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird middle ground, because I mostly started doing it to play video games with one of my friends back in high school when I had more free time, because we would just play video games together and be like, hey, we're kind of funny. Maybe we should put this on the internet. So we started doing that, and then I went to college and we lost touch, and I kind of ended up with the channel, and I saw some reaction videos, and I was like, this is a really good way to get reference for facial animation, because that's something that I definitely struggle with. Is I struggle with the kind of like subtle animation a little bit, just because as a person, it took me a while to be able to read people's expressions and what they meant. So being able to not understand them properly made it impossible to recreate them properly. But I was like, okay, maybe if I look at these videos and create my own, it'll be a good way for me to be able to recognize certain things and certain like reaction times and how people like will react acting wise to stimulus. And then I kind of fell into a community where people were like, hey, I don't have anyone to watch the show with. It's nice to be able to like see someone see theories or see people as passionate about a show as I am. And it was like, oh, I kind of fell into a rabbit hole of people who are really nice.
This is
But
something.
I mean, it's definitely more of like a hobby, and it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No. I was going to say that that in this industry, something that I found out, and this is something that I'm trying to kind of break into Latin American culture. We get a lot of, let's say, bad propaganda from the media, and something that I think is completely wrong in this is that this idea that is very prevalent here in Latin America, that let's say people in the US and in other countries are going to be like very racist, so they are not going to give them an opportunity just because they are Latinos. And then I'm here in the animation community, let's say, industry, and all that I found was support and love, and and it's like, no, this idea that you have in your head is not real at all. Like, and people ask me like, how did I get, like, for example, Academy Award winners in the interview, things like that. I just sent an email. That's how nice they are.
Yeah.
Like, I just sent an email. I just sent a Twitter. They say, yes, this show exists. They are really nice.
It's a lot of people will put people on pedestals and they feel like they can never reach out to it, when in reality a lot of people are willing to help each other. And that's like one thing that I got access to is my first RTX. I got to talk to a lot of animators, and they were all so willing to like help me and teach me the things that they knew. Like they were like, oh yeah, like, well, what are you doing in school right now? I was like, oh, well, I'm doing this and this. They're like, oh, well, have you tried this? Here, like, send me this, I'll look at your stuff. It's like people are always willing to help other people. And especially if you are like part of a group that does get a bad rep, is that people from like said group will usually reach out to help you because they know what it's like to be in that situation. It's why there's like the Women of RT panel where they would be like, yeah, I will always be there to support like another woman who's trying to go into the industry, because sometimes it can be hard. It's like if someone's already made it, they're always willing to help more people get to the same point. Like your job is always to make it easier for the person who follows you.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like I know that YouTube gets kind of this, let's say, call it bad rep because of lack of better words, but the people just think that you're just going to put like a camera on there and do something stupid and you get like a lot of attention. But I think we would know that it's way harder than that. So how did you went into finding the time to kind of pursue, because again, like I have seen your videos, like they are very elaborate, so I think that it's not as easy as people would like to think.
I definitely don't put as much time into them as a lot of other people do, and a lot of that is because I'm so busy with like school stuff. But like it does take a lot of time, and it's something that like a lot of people don't really understand, is because part of the problem with like it's both a nice part about it and a bad part about YouTube is that it feels very personable. Is that there's like when someone's up on a stage like performing, there's that divider of the stage and the performer, whereas that's like aspect isn't really present as much in YouTube. So people are like, oh yeah, they just like turned on a camera and did this, and it's like, no. I spent 30 minutes making sure that I looked like I wasn't dead. Like I double checked my internet connection, like waited for it to load, watched the actual thing, like tried to organize my thoughts into a cohesive manner. And then there's the whole process of editing it later, which is like, oh, if there was any audio issues ever, you have to try to problem solve it. If your audio's screwed up, you're screwed. Like, it's like there's a whole lot of layers to it. And it's like a similar problem that I think most people have with any kind of creative industry, is that if you don't do it yourself, you don't understand how much work goes into it.
Yeah. And have you gotten like any benefits when it comes to your career as animator from the YouTube channel, or any new opportunities, or anything that could, let's say, could we say that thanks to this channel, something good came to your career because of it?
I think so. I think it's partially just because of what I do on my YouTube channel, just since so much of my stuff is focused at Rooster Teeth, and since that's one of the things that kind of got me into animation, and because I'm someone who talks about it from an animation point of view, it did kind of bring me to the attention of their company a little bit. So I think through that, like, it did help me get more connections, and because like the crew will watch the reaction videos. They want to see how their shows affect people. So, and I think I'm one of very few animators who talk about the show. So I think being like, oh, this is a person who's acknowledging all the hard work we're going into, because I can remember at least 3 separate occasions where I started chewing out the internet for not giving them enough credit. Like, people were like, why isn't there enough episodes? Why aren't they longer? And I'm sitting here just like, it is 24 frames per second. That is so many characters. It takes so much time. Give them respect. I think it was just the fact that they had someone out there who even understood a fraction of the amount of work that they had to put in, that they were like, okay, let's, like, this is someone else who's in the field who I'm now aware of because of this community. I might as well, like, reach out to them. So I think that was definitely a large part of it. So I have kind of gotten some of that. I did get some connections out of it, but it wasn't like the exclusive thing I got.
Yeah, I think that the thing that was maybe a little bit more obvious to me was because you were like watching the episode and then doing the analysis of the episode. I found it very interesting because it never occurred to me, like, oh man, like, this is a good way of kind of learning the principles of animations, because if you're watching this thing right now and then you're going through the mental process of analyzing it, what works, what didn't work, things like that, then that's obviously going to get in here way better than if you just watch the episode and it's like, oh yeah, they did something here, and you just go about it mentally for a moment and then onto the next thing. Like, you're probably going to forget that really easy, but if you go into reviewing these things later on, then yeah, I think it helps a lot with the learning process. And I'm with you on that as well. Like, I think even we had these cases where the reason why I put the prices in our studio website was because we were getting too many people who were like, oh, I want an animation similar to what you did this here, and I got a budget of $500 and I want it done in 2 weeks. And it's like, dude, this thing had a budget of $30,000 and it took us a whole year to do. Yeah, no.
Yeah. No, it's...
People think that it's way easier than it is. But no, it takes a lot of work.
Especially with 3D, people think that the computer will do all of it for you. And it's like, just because Maya can do your in-betweens doesn't mean that Maya should do your in-betweens. Like, Maya shows up drunk to work and barely accomplishes whatever task it's given. Like,
there is this software as well for 2D animation. It's kind of new. It's called Kakani. And what it does is that pretty much you do the first, let's say you're going to do a sequence, you do the first frame, then you do the last frame, and you do the middle, and then there is an algorithm that learns kind of how you draw things and does all the in-betweens. But again, as you mentioned, it's not perfect. So for example, if we have in 2D animation and a scene where this is happening,
yeah.
like, we draw this side, but this side isn't drawn into this. So when it does all the transition over here, then it does a mess on this part. So it saves you some time, but you have to correct as well. Like, there are some scenes that it does fit better because of the nature of how you're doing things. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's not perfect.
It's like all the little places you can save time is where it matters.
And on this topic, have you seen like new technologies that are going to make this work easier in the future?
I've heard of some. I know that with Maya 2020, there's some new stuff people are excited about. The main thing that I've been seeing lately, although it's not necessarily a new technology, it's newer, I guess, is a plugin that you can buy that is very handy in a very dangerous way, in that it gives you a lot of capabilities where, like, if you have 2 poses, it will like it has a slider so you can ease towards one or ease towards another one, or it can roughly in between them. But I've kind of been in a hole in terms of new technology. I mean, I know some new motion capture stuff and like some very basic stuff that's been going on with like VR, but I've kind of been in a hole.
Yeah, I was asking because of this. I have another show where I'm trying to interview new people, CEOs from technological companies, some of them working with VR, and as I'm starting to see some real crazy stuff that I thought we wouldn't see, let's say, in 10 years or so. And for example, there is this software called VRroid, which allows you to create your own characters really, really easily. Like you can pretty much model the hair, whatever you want, given the texture you want, in a very, very easy way. And then you can have your own 3D character done, even if you don't have a lot of experience
Wow.
doing like modeling or anything like that. So this is the kind of thing, or even with VR, with VR chat, I have seen a couple of kind of fan-made animations that have surprised me, because what they are doing is like taking the model, putting it into the VR, and then they are creating a show very easily without spending a lot of money or effort into it. And that kind of parts of me gets really excited when I see this, because I think like, yeah, like that means that smaller studios can do more amazing things in the future, right? But another part of me goes like, oh, this is going to take a lot of jobs.
But what's nice is that they usually open up more as well.
Yeah.
It's just a whole other level of training.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the hard part. Like a topic that we have explored a lot into this podcast has been the transition in Disney from 2D to 3D. And that was kind of hard. Like, and I didn't leave it. I just saw it, like, I'm just seeing it like far away and listening stories about it. But like Disney came and it's like, okay, we're going to start just doing 3D animation. We're not going to do 2D. If you want to keep your job, we can teach you 3D. But if you don't want to learn 3D, you're going to be out of job. And there was a lot of people who didn't want to learn 3D because their thing was 2D animation. And they thought that they were going to get to this point, I don't know, where Disney was going to recognize it was a bad move or something like that, and they were going to go back to 2D, and that never happened. So that never happened, and there is a lot of people who lost their jobs back then who still don't have a job in animation because they never kind of adapted, they never learned. And again, like when you are already kind of an expert on something, and then you're being thrown to, okay, you're a complete noob now, and you have to learn from zero all over again. That is not an easy experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, I had two professors who both worked at Disney in 2D animation, and they both got shut down when they closed the Florida studio to switch to 3D. And at least one of them didn't think 3D was going to take off. He was like, there's no way that this is going to end up being anything of value. So he went into teaching, and then he was like, I will admit that I was wrong.
Yeah, and if you read this book, Creativity Inc., if you see the story there, back then, 3D animation in computer was, well, first of all, in the 80s was bad. It was really bad.
It was rough.
Yeah. And so this idea that you could produce a film that was computer animated was seen as completely ridiculous back then. And there was this guy at Cadmol who had created a computer called Pixar, and that's how it started. And he was doing the effects for the Star Wars trilogy, the first Star Wars trilogy in LucasArts. And then John Lasseter came and saw the technology, and he was like, holy shit, like we can create something new with this. Mm-hmm. And he went to Disney and told them this idea of doing a film with computer animation. And they thought he was being so stupid that they actually fired him just for talking seriously about doing computer animation. And that film was Toy Story 1.
Yeah. Sometimes I think about Toy Story 1 and it blows my mind a little bit because they knew that they couldn't get good shaders, so they went for a plastic look with toys because if they could get that to work. And then just the fact that the legs were in FK kills me. Like I can't even imagine only having FK legs. I can't. I'm someone who works almost exclusively in IK. I can't imagine being stuck with FK legs until Jurassic Park comes out. Like,
Yeah, definitely things have changed a lot since then. But yeah, like watching this history in that book, it was like brutal because Toy Story 1 came up, like Steve Jobs launched the iPod for the investors in the same day. In the first week, like the stock for Pixar had gone to the skies, and Disney had been in a rough patch for quite a while. So
yeah.
They realized that if we don't contain this now, they are going to eat us. So they bought, and this is the fun part, like they bought Disney,
Yeah.
Pixar, sorry, Disney bought Pixar, but if you see the deal, like Steve Jobs kept 50% of Disney actions, then Ed Catmull and John Lasseter became the kind of the director and creative director of Disney, and they had this deal where Disney couldn't touch any of the animation team from Pixar. So you kind of ask the question, who bought who?
Yeah, it's like we're going to absorb you so you don't absorb us.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is really interesting. But again, like and I'm seeing this kind of trend right now where people are thinking kind of the same thing, that the VR is not going to take over the animation as we know it right now. And say like, this sounds oddly familiar.
Yeah. It's like I think it'll be a while before like it becomes a huge aspect of things, but
Yeah.
I think we are going to be seeing more and more integration of it because just even the use of VR and Unreal in movies and TV has skyrocketed lately. But
Yeah,
I'm not even
definitely.
sure how they would go about doing like a VR movie just because of the whole setup of movie theaters. It would have to create like this whole new kind of cultural setup because at least with 2D and 3D, it's a movie that plays on a screen. With VR, it's like how do you recreate the theater experience in VR?
Well, thanks to this whole mess that's going on with the world right
Fair.
now, we don't even know these theaters are going to be a thing in the future.
Fair point.
AMC just declared bankruptcy.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. It's
yeah, a
like the
couple
only
of
movie
days
theater we
ago.
have around here.
Apparently, the stock was going down, and probably they say the plan is that they are going to go bankrupt now, so that they don't have to spend more, and that they are going to come back in the future. But I'm not sure, to be honest. There is another line of movie theaters called Cinemark, which is like very important here in Latin America. They just went into a debt of $250 million just to try to survive this couple of months.
Yeah.
so things are looking rough.
It's a rocky time, yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, like we thought like Disney being this monolith. Like in my mind, until a month ago, I thought like Disney was this beast that was never going to die, and I just realized that they have like 57 billion in debt because they went into debt to purchase Fox, and they only have 6.7 billion in cash. And their big bet was the movie Mulan that was kind of targeted at Chinese markets. and
Now
now
everything's
it's all freeze out, and then you start to see that the whole kind of network of companies from Disney, they all depend on having a lot of people into one place. And now that this is forbidden, that they are not receiving money at all, and they just went into two debts of $5 billion each. So more debt to what they already had. It's like, oh, this is not looking kind of good. Like,
I mean, they are getting a fair amount from Disney Plus, to be fair, but
no,
I know that like really?
it is at a loss.
Oh.
What pretty much happened is that they have Disney Plus, but they launched it at a loss. And the studies that they have made, the plan was that Disney Plus was going to make money until 2024. And what happened is right now that Disney Plus has a lot of shows, but if you're not like an animation aficionado or trying to watch like the old movies, like they don't have new content. People are signing
they don't
up
have
to
have new content anyway.
People are signing up to watch The Mandalorian on their trial, and then they're canceling the trial because there is nothing else to watch, and they cannot produce new content because we are in lockdown. So, it's bad. Well, again, like we don't know how it's going to look going on in the future, but again, I think we are not going to get to the point where people are going to be kind of, let's say, comfortable of using like a huge helmet for VR in the near future. So I think that VR is going to take off the moment they can produce a device that is really small and that you can put there easily in your head without having a lot of issues. So the moment that happens, I think it's going to take off. And probably that's going to change. That's going to be the new theaters. Because right now, as you mentioned, we don't know how to produce even movies, like how to deal with the whole 360 things. Like it is really easy to plan for a scene that looks really nice when you have just this 2D plane, like this square that you can plan for. But trying to make something cool for a whole environment, that's a little bit harder.
Especially with animation, because so much is done to camera, having the camera be wherever, there's going to be an angle where it looks bad. There's always going to be an angle where it looks bad. Oh.
Yeah, definitely. And there is this guy that I follow, Goro Fujita. He's been testing a lot with VR. And something that I think that is going to change a lot with VR as well is that part of what 2D animators don't like about 3D is this kind of mathematical world, like these complex worlds of polygons and things like that. But with VR, you just put your set, you just grab your, you just have your handles and you can actually draw your model in the air, like kind of you're doing the drawing. So that's what 2D animators like. So I think that once this thing develops a lot, we will see a lot of 2D animators jumping back into 3D. And I even saw this example. There is this place called, I think it was Workspace or something like that, where you can rent, you can pretty much rent these spaces for a month or pay a subscription. And they usually have like makerspace. That's what's called makerspace. So they have like a lot of makerspace for many things. Like, for example, if you want to learn how to do craft with iron or become a woodsman, something like that, you can do that. But there is also a lot of makerspace for technology. And in Sweden, I was in one where they had like this area for VR. They had the 3D printers as well. But something that I noticed is that next to the VR set, they had like this section to create clothes, and they even had the mannequin, the mannequin there. So I asked the guy about it, and they told me, oh, look, what happens here is that they put the mannequin into the VR world, into the VR area. So the designer puts the headset on, and she starts like creating the suit or the dress or whatever into the mannequin. Now they take the model out and now they can produce it in real life. And I was like, wow. So that I think that we're going to see.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict. Again, it's hard to predict what it's going to look like because there is a lot of possibilities. but again, I think that the message for animators will be like, if you are a 3D animator who thinks like VR is not going to take over, think again.
Just maybe consider taking like a little bit of research into it, especially with like programs like Unreal, because I know real-time rendering is something that is being very big right now.
Yeah, one of the interviews that I had in the other podcast in Level Up was with this girl, and she created a very interesting startup using VR. So she's trying to help people meditate better. So you put the VR headset, and they have created kind of a game, a word game or something like that. And you have a tracker for your heart, and you have a tracker for your brain. So you're trying to do the meditation, and this is tracking your brain waves as well as your heart rate. And as long as you're meditating right enough, you will be able to advance in the game, controlling it through your experience as a meditation. But if you start having like negative thoughts or kind of getting distracted, then you're going to start regressing into the game. So there are some very smoked ideas, like very crazy ideas coming out.
It's interesting hearing stuff like that, because I remember there was a game a couple years back that used a heart rate monitor, and it was like the more scared you were, the scarier the game got. And it's just so funny that like that game, I don't think it ever got fully kickstarted because it just never did. And yet that's kind of where we're heading towards again. And like that was like 5 years ago, and it was so ahead of its time that it just didn't happen. And now we're heading into that period. Everyone's like, maybe this was a good idea.
Or even with the interactive movies that we have now, like right now are very basic, like you are kind of choosing where to go. But imagine in the future, like having a movie that, as you say, you're being tracked, and if you're in a horror movie, and if you're getting scared, like the movie gets worse and worse.
It's like a BioWare game, yeah.
Yeah, or you imagine this, like again coming back to this Ruby series. For those who do not know, in this series there is the monsters called Grim, and they get attracted to negative feeling. So imagine it being immersed into that world, and if you get angry in a game, and if you get angry or something or frustrated, you attract more Grim to you.
Especially if it was like a co-op mission.
Oh.
The more frustrated you get at your partner, the more likely you are going to die, and it's just an endless
Everybody will
cycle.
Keep dying. Like, why are you shooting there? Like, aim better, and then a lot of dreams.
I haven't gotten to play any VR games, but I really want to. I'm just like, one day I will crack open that sweet package and dive in. Hopefully, when they're a little bit more universal.
Yeah, definitely. Right now, again, we're still in a very basic phase, but it is progressing way faster than we think. Definitely it is. Going into another topic, what will be your advice for, let's say, if you were to meet like a young, driven artist who has a lot of talent and wants to follow a similar path that you want to aim, what would be your advice to this person?
Just keep running towards what you want. Like, there's always going to be people who are going to try to stop you and who don't believe you or believe in your skills, and who will say like, oh, well, you can't do that, or, well, oh, someone's done that, there's no original ideas, like, why even bother? And people will be like, oh, that's not a stable career choice. Just, it's hard to not let it get to you, but just try to push past it. And it's okay to stop and take breaks and have those moments where you do kind of doubt yourself, because those moments are inevitable. It's impossible to not have those moments. But what's important is that you have those moments and you stand up after them. Is that things are going to be hard and you're going to question yourself, and sometimes it will be hell. But for every moment of hell, there's going to be a moment that is equally amazing. That will make you realize, right, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I want to go forward on this path. This is the feeling that I want to give to other people. And it's just a matter of keeping running towards that as fast as you can and doing everything you can, learning everything you can, trying to figure out why you like the things that you like and learning to like those things and not be ashamed about it, and just really embracing what it is you want to do and doing whatever you can to get there.
Nice. And counter to that, what will be the advice that they should ignore?
The advice they should ignore. It's less of advice and more something that people are told. It's like, whoever says that you don't need to know how to draw to be a good 3D animator, while they're technically not wrong, they're also not right. Learning, like knowing how to draw and understanding the physical form and being able to draw it is so helpful, and it saves you so much time. And everyone's like, oh, well, I'm just doing 3D instead of 2D because I can't draw. That is stupid. Learn to draw. Your director will thank you. Your leads will thank you. You will thank you. Learn to draw. Even if it's just a stick figure, learn to draw.
Yeah, this is something very important. And the good thing about drawing, I think there is this misconception, and this idea is completely stupid. If you believe it, please drop it away, that people just are born and they naturally know how to draw. Like, no, like that is learned.
No.
That is learned. And there is this guy, like Robert Kondo, he was the creative director for Ratatouille and Toy Story 3, and he then created his own company, Tonko House, and won an Academy Award on a short film called The Dawn Keeper. And if you see his art, it's like really amazing. But if you watch the interviews that I did with him, like he will tell you that in his group, in college, in his group, he was like the one person who was the worst at drawing. So he took like 5 hours of his day, every day, like to draw every day, until he got better. And now he's an Academy Award. So an Academy Award winner. So yeah, nobody is born and knows how to draw. Like you have to.
Yeah, like there are people who like start off a little bit ahead, but everyone has to learn. Like you can get to that point. Like an hour of practice is worth more than being born with talent. Like it's just practice. Like I literally was pursuing a minor in concept art and I didn't start drawing until March of my freshman year of high school. Like it is something you learn.
Another tricky question that I want to ask you is that what is something that you didn't expect at all when you got into this career that eventually you realize is like a very important principle or very important lesson that is very true and it's very important to know?
I learned a lot of things at the same time when I kind of got into art, so it's a little tricky, but I think that the fact that you will not be able to please everyone. There are always going to be people that you are going to clash with. There's always going to be people whose story ideas don't match with yours and who don't go well. And sometimes you can get out of that situation and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to deal with terrible people and you have to play nice, but playing nice with someone you don't necessarily like is a skill that is crucial and can keep you from burning so many bridges.
Nice. Yeah, that is definitely something important to know. Like no matter what you do, no matter how great you are, you're never going to be able to please everybody. And also, have you ever had like a failure or something that's felt like a failure that actually set you out to greater things or a success in the future?
I mean, it wasn't like a huge failure, but I hold myself to a very high standard, so I kind of consider it one. Is my first 3D character animation class I didn't do very well in. I really struggled. Like we weren't getting a lot of critique and I didn't have the skill to be able to tell what was wrong with my stuff. So the grades I was getting were a lot lower than anything I received in any of my other classes, in classes I didn't care about and in classes I'd gotten beforehand. And it was definitely a case of like, what am I doing wrong here? And kind of that idea of you have to fail in order to learn was really kind of drilled into my head there. And because of that, it kind of gave me the opportunity. And as one of my professors said, it gave me the spite to prove them wrong. Like the idea that something was indicating that I couldn't do this, that it wasn't meant to be, that I wasn't cut out for it. And it gave me that idea of like, you know what? No. I will do this and nothing can stop me. And that is a very powerful energy to have.
Yeah. On that a little bit, would you consider to be a little bit disagreeable not on the, let's say not on the common term, but on the, let's say, psychological side, where you get this idea that, okay, this is a goal that I want to do, and you will not stop until you actually achieve it, no matter what everybody says?
It depends on the goal. Because like there are some goals where I'm like, I will hit this mark no matter what. And then there are other goals where I'm like, yeah, no, it'd be cool. Doesn't, it's whatever, but it'd be nice. I'll work for it. But if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to like throw myself into an ocean and sob my woes away. Like,
nice. Well, this is a question that I think you will have a nice insight, since you have been, I think you have been in this place a lot of times, based on what you have told me so far. But when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do to get back to kind of your center and keep working?
Usually one or two things. Sometimes I'll just kind of like have this, I basically just like disassociate and I just keep working while my brain is off. Or like if I'm overwhelmed, I'll just be like, you know what, I will take this one thing at a time and I'll throw myself wholeheartedly into one thing. And if I can't do that, I usually will walk away and I'll either angrily play the piano or I'll play a very angry video game. And that's enough to just like get out that frustration and get out that extra energy and all of that panic and be like, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z. These things are first. I will start there. And like, I'll still be anxious. I'll still be overwhelmed, but I'll be a little bit less overwhelmed. And that's what matters.
Yeah, definitely. Fighting games are really good for that for me. And
yeah,
go ahead.
No, I played a lot of Smash during a quarter when I was really overwhelmed. I got very good at Smash. I used to be terrible at it, and then I got very good at it.
Yeah, some Hollow Knight will frustrate you more. That's that. Once I was very frustrated, and I'm going to play Hollow Knight just to pass off, and that was a mistake. And this is like the hardest question that we have so far.
Oh God!
But it's one of my favorites one. Let's say you wake up tomorrow in a different dimension, very very similar to this one. Nobody knows about you, but you have all your skills, all your experience, $500 in your pocket, and you have all the tools that you need to create art. What will you do to get to this point, professionally speaking, as soon as possible?
Oh man.
All your portfolio is gone.
Oh God, my portfolio is gone. Okay. I'd probably have a panic attack first. I'm getting completely real. Oh God, after that, I honestly think I would probably just like sit down and just get to work on creating the things that I like to create and just make good art and find that universe's equivalent of what company likes to do the stuff that I like to do and just keep going at it. It's not a great answer. It's panic and then, I don't know, keep going. But that's basically how I live my life in this dimension. So
pretty similar path. And going a little bit into that, what would be your ideal in the future, like career-wise? Like, what will be, let's say, your months in it? What will be your biggest goal for your professional life?
It's honestly pretty abstract. What I want to accomplish is I want to give someone the same feeling that the Red trailer gave to me. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was really kind of confused. I didn't know what to pursue. And I saw that and I had just like this spark. And I want to be able to give that feeling to someone else through animation somehow. It's really vague and it's abstract, but I feel like that I just want to be able to give that to someone else.
Yeah, I think that will be a powerful film. And for the people who are listening and who don't know what we are talking about, go watch RWBY Red Trailer on YouTube, and you get an idea of what she's talking about. Because I think that got the attention of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very powerful thing to do. And more on the logistics side, what is something that you would like to do, like project-wise, or let's say, do you plan to find yourself working as an animator, or are you looking in the future, be the distant future, like create your own animation studio, produce your own series? What would be your goal on the logistics side?
I don't know if I would want to like run my own studio. I don't think I'm necessarily cut out for that. I definitely would want to work as an animator and keep working as an animator, but I think in my free time, I've been developing a webcomic for a really long time, and I'm at the point where I feel like I can like start it soon. So eventually I'd like to do that on the side, but honestly, I'd be content just being an animator at a place where I can work on the stuff that I love. It's not a very lofty goal. I'm not like, oh yeah, I want to be director. That's a lot. That's a lot of meetings, a lot of pressure, a lot of delegating. I do not delegate well. It's like, just give me my shots. I will animate them. I will go home. I will draw my comics, and I will live my life. That's it. It's a simple aspiration.
Yeah, that is a good one. Is there any lesson that you would like to give that we haven't talked into this interview yet?
I was out of focus in my camera. I give up. Not that I can really think of off the top of my head. Just like, find the things that you like, find out why you like them, and just kind of run headfirst into whatever direction that carries it. Don't be afraid of messing up, because that's more fun, and you'll learn more from that than any time you'll succeed. Like, it feels great to succeed. It feels fantastic, but there's always something you can do to be better, and there's always something you can do to push something an extra notch. And if you're not growing and you're not learning, then what's the point?
Yeah, there is a powerful lesson that I got from one of my mentors in the past, and I try to tell everybody about it, is that in the present, you should be always aiming to learn right now what is going to help you out in the next 3 years. And for example, a recent example of mine will be that I learned that every 7 to 8 years we get like an economic crisis, things like that. And obviously we didn't have one since 2008. So there was from 2017 and so on into this last year, there has been a lot of people, very smart people telling like, look, we are overdue with this. Like,
Watch
we
out.
don't know. Yeah, we don't know when this is going to happen. We just know that it could happen tomorrow, it could happen in the next 3 years, but an economic crisis is coming. And what I started doing then with my business was that I wanted to build something that was solid enough that could withstand one of these kind of issues. And one of the things we did was to kind of streamline everything so that we could work online anywhere where we had internet. We automated everything, and we created a solid base. And back in December, I felt like, oh man, like I finally, the vision that I had to create, I finally have it. And then this thing happened. and because
Yeah.
and because of that, like obviously it has impacted also a lot, and there is a lot of less clients. But because of all these actions that we took, we can survive it, and we can still do things, and we can still get clients, and and and, and that is my personal again example. But in the case of 3D animation, I think, like as you say, like everybody should be trying to learn right now something about VR, and even if it is 2D animation as well. I think there are things that if you start putting attention, you will see kind of a trend. And if you start learning things now that will help you out 3 years in the future, your future self will thank you a lot. So yeah, learning a lot, as you say, it is really important. Always keep pushing. And if people want to find you online, where will be the best place to do so?
I have my website, which is just my name, which is hard to spell, I will admit. But I'm also on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. Pretty much if you Google my name, I show up and you can find pretty much everything, which is still really weird to me.
Good
but,
SEO.
No, it's weird because, like, you know, I remember being in middle school and, like, we would just type kids' names and be like, haha, I wonder what random stuff shows up. If you do that now, it's actually me. And I'm like, this is cursed.
Well, the moment you have a website, like, Google
Fair.
index you.
Fair.
Well, I'm going to put all the links into the description of this interview below, so if you want to follow her, you can find it here. Arryn, thanks a lot for being here and giving us your time.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. No problem.
It was really fun.
So this has been the last episode of the Creative Hustler Show. If you like it, please click the like button below and also subscribe to our channel. Or if you're listening to us in the podcast, then follow us so you can get notified when the next episode comes up. Until next time.